Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases.
Hello, everyone. Glad to see you tonight. I made it back up here to Georgia. You see, I'm in the studio, and I have the blue light. So we're good to go tonight. And appreciate if anybody is new to the channel, while you're in the channel, in the chat part of it, we'll have a presentation. And during that presentation, if you have any questions, just throw them in there, and I'll try to keep up with them the best I can. Mrs. Steve is in Florida with the grandkids. Double alt and triple alt. And so I'm up here in Georgia by myself, maintaining the properties during this ice age that has moved into Georgia, which we're not used to at all. So you just have to bear with me. My studio is a little bit cool, but everybody else, wherever you're at, stay safe, stay warm. And but we'll get on with the show tonight. We're going to be talking about the Gilgo Beach 4 and new charges that was brought against Rex. And the reason that I was looking through some materials and from my training from the early days, while we had computers, we did not have access to the internet like we have now. And we had to rely upon something that was books. We had everything. I pulled a few. This here's homicide investigations. I pulled a few out of my library. I still have all my old books, interviews. Let's see what this one is. And cold case analysis. But, and that's what we had to research through. And then even what Mrs. Steve especially enjoys is the blood stain pattern analysis. But because at any time that she can get into Tyvek, she absolutely looks forward to those times together. But as I was saying, while I was looking through these books and things and looking at some of the profiling materials also that I have, I decided to do a search on online and look up some of the data and some of the information of why offenders pick certain areas as dumping grounds. I have other cases I'm looking at and working, and through my training and through the materials are out there, plus what's online now. But I did go back and I looked at, even during the early days of the internet and publishings and books and articles, used to everybody subscribed and you had monthlies that would come out. And so I looked back during the time that the Long Island serial offender was active, and I found an article, I think it's from 2001 from this publisher, and it's a great article. If you have time to read it, I'll pull some excerpts from it, and if you have time to read it, absolutely look at it for the fact it talks a great deal about a lot of constraints and considerations of what these serial offenders look at as far as where they commit the crimes, why they commit them, we're in certain areas. And there's different classifications of different types of offenders. You have some offenders, such as Rex, that works within a confined area that we know of, with a confined, with certain, a dumping ground that's extremely focused within a narrow pathway of one dumping ground that we know of. He could have others, and probably does, and maybe even different states. But and so this study and this article basically focused on what drives these individuals and what thought processes they go through and some of the analysis that the professionals have looked at, so that they will have a better understanding when working with law enforcement of how to identify. But if you get a chance to look at it, and that's what I want to do, to bring to your attention to it so that it'd make a little bit more sense of why, because I'm not, what is different about the Long Island serial offender than a lot of other cases? We're at a state park, public beach, highly traveled highway outside one of the highest populated cities in the world. And he was still able to find a location and still able on multiple occasions to go back to that same location, same area, and dump victims to they were, what time did he do this? What type of time frame did he have? And that's what we're going to be discussing. How was he able to pick these areas? Why was he able to pick these areas? And will his other areas, if he is as prolific as he could be, and I think that there's more than just these four. I absolutely believe that several of the others, if not all the others along that roadway are linked to him, but I expect at some point they'll find and link him to other crimes in other states. I think it's just a matter of time. But and that's what we want to talk about tonight. All right, let's get into the presentation. Before we get into it too much, like I said, if you're new to chat, be respectful of family, mods, and each other. Let me check in chat, see if we got any questions yet. Like I said, I'm by myself. Mrs. Steve is not with us. Hello, Michelle, Dale, Southern Gal, Ollie. I'm glad you got. Good to see you. Single mom. Good to hear. Good to see you. Olivia too. All right. If you have any questions, just throw them in here. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit different. Nanar, good to see you. Than normal. Josh the Posh. Because Mrs. Steve is in Florida with the grandbabies. Is it below 60? Where I'm at currently, I think it's probably by now it's in the teens. The sun has set. I think the high today was like 24 degrees. And so, yes, when I woke up this morning, got out, it was already well into the 20s. And that is not something a Southern boy enjoys. I can tell you that now. All right. Demead, good to see you. Olivia too. Jill, Matt. It's supposed to be 15 degrees. I think that's probably what it'll be here, probably low teens. They said some areas in here in Georgia get single digits. I hope I'm not part of that. I love those names. I'm in Florida Panhandle. We are in the deep freeze. I'm not okay. I don't guess so. Lee and Susan, good to see you. Mrs. Steve is, she's somewhere in Florida, but she's monitoring it tonight. Junior Johnson. All right. Okay. Hold up for a few minutes. Teresa, good to see you. Like I said, I just don't want to get too far behind. All right, let's get into the presentation now. Then, of course, this is Rex Heuermann, and we will probably find out that he does have multiple state. I would believe that's my opinion. I'm speculating. Of course, there's always that he is considered to be innocent until proven guilty. But there is they have probable cause. They have charged him, and I do have a certain bias towards law enforcement and probable cause. Most of my life and career was based upon those efforts made by law enforcement. That when an arrest was made, we absolutely had faith that while we executed those warrants, that they were true, and all the information showed that they are more than likely responsible parties. All right, let's see here. But of course, we had the Gilgo 4 as Megan Waterman. His most recent charge that he has is Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, and Amber Costello. And as you can see, there was a cluster of 4 at Gilgo Beach. If you go on Google Earth and look at Gilgo Beach, you'll see that there's a state park. There's a beach there. If you look at it during the summertime time frame, people use that beach. There's vehicles on the beach. There's tents. There's population. And why in the world and how in the world would he be able to dispose or drop off within this dump site these victims? At what time frame? And was there a deeper purpose within his psyche, as far as what was driving him to do this? Because there's a lot of places that are far more remote than where this is. And that's an interesting thought of, was that part of his fantasy and what was going on? And as we go over some of the topics, you'll see that there's some risk reward issues. And of these offenders, that when they commit crimes, why do they take certain steps, and what are those steps, and why do they do that? For the fact that it's all about them. It has nothing to do with the victims themselves. It's whatever is the feeding force that drives them to commit these crimes, and then their risk assessment of how they're going to not only commit the crime, but how they're going to dispose of the victims, and picking that selection in that area. You know, you have a lot of different serial offenders that you can look at over the years, from BTK to Bundy, and you'll see that some offenders, that they, during the abductions, they do take them to generally a very remote area within a certain time period and time frame. But they have different constraints that they work on. And you're going to hear a lot about spatial constraints and things of that nature, because the article references a lot about the spatial times constraints and activities and what drives these individuals to do this. But if you get a chance, the environmental psychology publishing of a multivariate analysis of serial offenders' disposal site location choice. And it's a great, for the people out there that's interested in true crime, you will find this an extremely interesting article. And if just look it up, and we tried to get a link in it, but it wouldn't link out. But if you look at this, and not only this article, there's probably a lot of articles out there, but this is extremely interesting. I pulled some excerpts from it to get y'all's thought process flowing along with mine, and for y'all to consider of why and what would drive the Long Island serial offender to pick this location. And if he has other sites, what did he learn from picking of this location or picking of other locations that drove him to this area? And if he has additional dump sites, where are they, and what did he learn and evolve into as he moved forward? Risk and reward. Part of this article talks about that one is that the offender needs to balance the effort required to travel from his residential base. And from the processing of the crime scene, we know that it appears that a lot of things went on within his residence when his wife was away, from a lot of the reporting, including the risks associated with being in possession of the body while traveling. You know, if you have if the crime scene of where the bodies are dumped at is not where the homicides occurred, where did he commit those offenses? What type of packaging? And we know that there were some burlap bags, sacks that were used that will come back and be used in the trial due to being linked through some of the DNA with Rex. So, but that while traveling with the benefits of leaving his victims' bodies as far from his home as possible, the simplest assumption is that in general, the balance of risk and rewards would remain similar for each offender from one offense to another. And so that's why you'll have these dump sites, that you'll have a cluster of victims, is that he has taken in the risk and reward, he has picked the area, and he was successful time on the first offender, and who is the first victim that was there, and how did he moved from one victim to the next, and what encouraged his ability that as he continued to drop victims off there. We know we have at least 4 victims, but I would imagine that some of the other victims that have already been recovered, and probably there's victims that may not have been recovered yet, that's within that area. But he would have learned from this. And did he learn from another dump site that hasn't been linked to him yet to pick this area, or will the next dump site be similar? And then we have the distance. And back in the day, we had the FBI, they were looking more of the recognized local offender that had ties to the community, that when they committed an offense, not just a serial offender, but it could be anyone that had committed a violent crime, such as a homicide, that packaged a person and transported them. And there was a rule about 7 miles, 10 minutes. And that was the rule that they hammered into us back in the day. And I think it's still probably pretty close to that, because we have an internal time clock. Now, you have these outliers that go far greater distances than that. And such as if you look at the Evansdale case with Lyric and Elizabeth, that's 20 something miles, far outside from where they was abducted to where their eventual bodies were located. All right, before we get too much further, I'm gonna get caught back up in chat. All right, CJK, good to see you. I won't get too far behind, guys. I remember books. I have libraries and the smell of all those books. Yes, that you're telling your age there if you have books. Josh Posh, Kindred. Oh, all right. The real Micro K. Hello, how are you tonight? In a very secluded area, probably didn't think anyone would find them. And, some of the offenders, but when you look at the Long Island, as far as being built up and construction that being developed, it is an area that will probably never be developed. And by him picking such an area, is that a clue that law enforcement overlooked? That why would someone select this area? Would be due to that they have knowledge of construction and things that were going on, and but that's just something for us to look in and remember, that if certain areas are picked, why do they pick those areas? And for the fact that there's been a lot of victims found over the years whenever people go in and clear land and start developing, that it's not uncommon to find not only recent burials, but ancient burials also. What the Beck, good to see you. SB 74, good to see you. I'm glad to see you back, SB 74. I'll try not to block you this time. Good to see you. I made a mistake one time on SB 74, me and my big fingers, and I apologize for that. Anna Lizette, good to see you. History on foot. That's Yankee cold. Yes. The northern temperatures have invaded Georgia, and it's here with us. I'm coding. I'm making typos. I've almost banned 2 or 3 people. I'm kind of chilled myself down here. Don't even understand that number. -10 for 3 days. Don't even understand it. 24 degrees. That's a tropical heat wave. If only it could be 14. I'm telling you, y'all guys, be careful out there. True Crime Web, Southern Gal, how common or uncommon is it for offenders to have multiple dumping grounds? And we're going to go into that. They talk about this, but in one of the topics here of what would make, and it's risk evaluation of how close did we come to being discovered? Is there some indications that there is law enforcement interest in a certain area or searches going on? Are there vehicles rescue? Is the news covering certain areas? And so there's a lot of things that may go on. Or as he's driving by, does he see someone staked out? And having been part of stakeout crews for a lot of time, being on those special teams, that you're out there, but you can be discovered, are some of those details. Let's see here. Boston Christian, good to see you. Yeah. Hugh is things a Southern boy enjoys: grits and ham steak. Cold weather, not so much. You're correct. Man, I got kicked off of YouTube. I'm back. I'm glad you're back. You know, and Matt, I looked at that and about it being secluded, and there is that little side road that's there in the area, and and when the beach is not being used in the middle of the night, um, and um, that would probably be the only thing. But how many times and how often, and that's one of the things that in law enforcement, I've been on stakeouts and had offenders park within 50 feet of where I was hidden in some of these forested areas in a vehicle, and they not even see my car at 50 feet. And then, of course, whenever I'm ghillie suited up in the foliage, then of course it doesn't matter if you're at 5 feet, you're not going to see me. But and that's the thing is that when what are the odds and what were the risks that did he have a pattern that he would drive by and check all the parking areas, make sure there's no vehicles for the beach, and what entry areas and what access points are to the beach, because there would not be very good for him to be spotted unloading a victim from his vehicle. But I was surprised about how many people were on the beach actually when I looked at it. And I believe this is the a part of it that more than likely on the nights that he chose were low moon nights and of transporting, and that would have been some of the environmental factors that he would have looked at, and law enforcement would have looked at if they had known he was active at the time. But these people were missing, some of them for years prior to being discovered. All right, let's get back into the presentation here. But locations. Furthermore, it was found that the locations of previous disposal locations also exerted an influence on the location of subsequent disposal sites. So the studies were done on some of these offenders that had multiple long-term victims and why they chose certain areas. It appeared that there was more of a conceptual continuum where the distances the offender typically put between their disposal sites was determined by their perception of a safe distance. And so we have, even in this one dump site, we have several miles of in between the victims of why did he at some point go to where the Gilgo 4 were, and why did he pick that location? Was there something specific that he liked about that area and put those 4 there? And why he picked other areas? Was it occupied? Was there vehicles? Was it traffic? And but there's a lot of different things of that. It's the offender's perception of a safe distance of that was the driving factors for it. And then the spatial cognition. Therefore, it is proposed here that bodies of disposal locations will reflect the spatial cognitive frameworks within which serial offenders operate. Furthermore, while the homicide itself may be assumed often to take place in the heat of emotion, it is more likely that the disposal site is selected after some consideration before or after the homicide. And we have to look at that in great detail, that these offenders know they're going to commit the crime. They know who the victim is, or they know the type of victim that they're going to select. And for the fact that, just like with the Delphi case, that we have an abduction, or even with Evansdale, we have an abduction. You do not have an abduction unless you have some place to take them, so that you can do whatever your fantasy or whatever is driving that you're a certain type of offender, organized, and that you go out and do this. If you're disorganized, everything's going to happen there. There's two different types of offenders out there. But these organized offenders, they're going to already have it all planned out. They're going to have something that will control the victims. They're going to use some type of ruse to lure them into some type of safe, relaxed state. I mean, you look at John Wayne Gacy, did the same thing. He used magic tricks to lure them and get them handcuffed and where he could control them. All these offenders have so many different ways and different ruses of how they get the upper hand. But they also have an area that they've already figured out of, this is where I'm on, whatever ruse I'm going to use, whatever manner of death that they choose, where that location is, and then we've got to transport. So they got to have some type of vehicle or manner of moving this person from where the homicide occurred to some of the dump sites. With John Wayne Gacy, of course, it was just his crawl space, but he would have had other victims also, and that weren't there that he would have transported, and I'm sure he did. All right, so let's go back over. Let's go over here to chat right quick, get caught back up. Sensei Wackadoodle, good to see you. So Nightbot being kind tonight. Good. True Crime Time. I love to read it. This is my jam. Excellent. And there's a lot of others out there. I have some psychological, some of the profiling books and things that we had back before this so-called internet came along. We had computers, just did not have full access to what's out there now. Steve, do you think it's strange that the victims all have his wife's hair on them? It is odd, and that makes you think of that. While was she there, or while she was away, what acts did he commit that would allow that contamination or cross contamination? Did he use her hairbrush? Was there certain interactions in certain locations within the home, and was that all part of his? There's all kind of sickness and some of the things that these offenders do out there, and for what reasons, that would he have found enjoyment in watching his wife prepare or get up with her own hairbrush on something that he may have brushed a victim's, or was he collecting that hair as far as false clues, trying to stage it because he knows that his wife, who is out of the country at these times, that if her hair is found, that it's something that can't be connected to the crime scene, that they're looking for someone that they would never link because she has an alibi. I don't know. There's a lot of strangeness there. And then R says, while the parkway does get busy at times, especially when beaches are opening or there's a show starting ending at the theater, much of the time there's hardly anyone near others. It's often empty. Yeah, and of course you're on a long, straight, flat highway, and at night you would be able to see headlights and vehicles for great distances. Their channel has been digging deep into Rex's history. Looks like everywhere he has lived, worked, or gotten building permits, women tend to disappear. I'm sure it's all coincidence. Yes, and there's a slide talking about this particular point. Hello, Christina. You and Carolyn. Junior, you give me too much credit. I've got this Google machine. I've got it. It's got me. One of us has got the other. Old comedian said one time, shoot up here amongst us. One of us got to have relief. Down in the Carolinas, and also the is it New Jersey, where the casinos are. There's several places that they have looked at that for parallels of some of the offenses, and we'll just have to see where those investigations go. I think one of the Carolina cases that I did a show on a few weeks ago, the composite that they did on the offender, I mean, it's a dead ringer for Rex, no doubt. And this is some of all of these were dumped in hot weather. Why wasn't there enough odor or decomposition to draw attention? The dump site is near homes. Um, you know, uh, I don't know about the sea breeze coming in. Was it in a direction commonly during certain times of summer that you always have those breezes that blow in certain directions? And it just happened to be that during those time frames, if any were dumped during specific area times, that plus animals, birds, and we've all seen things that happen. Um, you have that sea breeze and um, smells of the ocean, I guess. I don't know. That's a good question. Um, every decomposition and every victim I've ever been around that was there for any time, especially those that are within residential confinement, it is something that you'll never forget. Outside, if I had a choice of working a crime scene inside or outside, I'm picking outside all day long. And the inside sometimes during the summer months, it was absolutely unbelievable. There were some people that couldn't go in and do their job. Kelly Still says, I'm glad you called her live. 18 degrees in Oklahoma. You're like here. Let's see here. Let's see what's going on. Yes, they had some property. Like I said, it was in Carolinas, and uh, I think one of the family members of a missing person uh, brought up the composite to law enforcement. Austin Christian, good to see you. How important is location? Well, and that's the thing is that when we look at the safe distances, these offenders are operating can explain the deliberate separation between subsequent sites. It may be that in order to maintain a perceived safe distance between disposal sites, the offender has to move to separate areas on each occasion. So a lot of variables could drive this offender to what does he perceive as a safe distance from one victim to the next? Is it parking areas? Is it traffic patterns? uh, uh, there's a lot of different things that might make this offender totally just abandon one dump site and go to another. And I believe that will be the case with this. And we have to look at it a little bit more and see where it goes. But one of the doctors who wrote the article and came to certain findings draws the attention to a threefold classification of serial offenders that he calls the travelers who cross state lines, state boundaries, and this may be what Rex is, that they cover thousands of miles up and down the East Coast, and also even properties in Vegas that he may have had access to. So there's a lot of different areas where if Rex meets this first classification, and he would have possible dump sites in each or near each one of these locations. And then you have the locals, which is another classification, who remain in their home state, and then you have the place-specific offenders who don't leave their home, and that Hickey found that 50% of the male offenders were categorized as local offenders, and the majority operated in a specific place or general urbanized area, but did not travel into other states. So, of course, it appears that with the Long Island serial offender, he's in that 71%, but he covers every one of them, that even within the state. And that's how come I think that the numbers of victims, that if Rex Heuermann is who I think he is, that his number, and I believe that in my personal opinion, he will be an extremely prolific offender, for the fact of he has the means, he has the understanding to commit these crimes. He had money and was able to manipulate these persons and dump them for over such a long period of time without anyone being the wiser, and able to enter back into society. And what was that learning process? How did he learn to go out and buy those burner phones? So what drove him down that path? And it's absolutely amazing that he was able to operate as long as he has. Now, Wrestler was another one that included part of information for this article, is that inherent within these typologies, there's been discussion of the spatial behavior associated with different types. You have the organized, disorganized dichotomy of that suggests that some of the behaviors that distinguish the two types is the distances they typically travel to carry out a homicide. It suggests that the disorganized homicide is likely to remain close to home, while the organized offender would travel further afield. And I will give that Rex is going to be within the organized. And then Holmes and DeBurger, they proposed a distinction between geographically stable and geographically transient serial offenders. According to the authors, geographically stable offenders live in the same areas for some time, commit homicides in the same or nearby area, and dispose of bodies in the same or nearby areas, which Rex appears to have fell mostly within this, that we know that this is his downfall. He was discovered as far as the Long Island serial offender, and so this led to his downfall. But what will it lead to in the future? Just don't know yet. And then they go on to suggest that, contrary to the popular belief that nomadic serial offenders drive thousands of miles in their hunt for victims, most never lack for readily available victims within their own neighborhood. And so why do they choose to go outside their neighborhood? The rationale explanation for this travel is that it was used to confuse law enforcement. Simply that. They did not want to continue those homicides within the constraints of their community, and that their decisions to travel a great distance to offend is greatly influenced by the desire to avoid apprehension. And I think Rex did some of that also. But we have like Bundy. He traveled the country in flight and continued committing. He'd go on travels, different areas across the Northwest for different reasons. And so he had victims, and he would travel a lot. And you can look up, there's serial offenders from the Golden State offender who traveled throughout California to other offenders, I-5, and those corridor crimes that were committed, that you have these people, but how certain offenders, they may leave their victims within the crime scene. And then you have some that just have abductions. And each of these have their own little manners of operations, motives, modus operandi, how they commit their crimes, how they move forward through them. And it's all extremely interesting. But anyway, and this is just the spatial cognition of that individuals such as Rex, that they'll look at this and that they understand how to acquire, organize, utilize, revise, and the knowledge of their environment is most about how animals, including us, behave within space and the knowledge they build around it. So that he has a certain environment. He knows what his living conditions are. He knows when his people that would be available to put him under high risk of discovery. And so he has to let his wife and sons and family travel. And while they're away, he gets to play. And but then he knows the type of victim he wants. And it's all through his ability to organize and utilize all that knowledge that he has of these people. And he evolves into this type of very efficient offender. And then that efficient offender has the abilities and understands how to dispose, so that he, through his risk and reward, understands how to dispose of them long term. And he was rather successful for a long time. But like I said, it all comes back, and this will eventually haunt him. All right. Let's see. Let's see here. I'm wondering how many more homicides he'd be charged with and how many more victims they might find in their locations. That will depend if they get some type of deal worked out. I'm hoping that they're able to work out some deal with him, and that he'll come forth, and it's a small chance, but that he'll come out and tell his story, that he'll do a BTK. And while I still think that BTK has other victims that he didn't confess to, and I'm hoping that's what happened with Rex, and that he does step forward and they work out some type of deal, and we have a true understanding of it. Sensei, do you think he's going to be known as a prolific serial offender? Absolutely. And yes, they do have cooling off periods, and they have things that happen in their lives. BTK did the same thing, of where there's family involvement and certain things occur, and they'll have these periods. But once again, that monster raises up and then goes back out. And but I do think that absolutely he has other victims elsewhere. Let's see here. His brother lives in South Carolina and his mother lives in Irvins. Do you think some victims in those states? Absolutely. Wherever he has family has an excuse to be there. It may not be in their hometown, but it would be localized areas of where he would have access to, or even as he traveled. And that's some of the things that they will look at, just like with Kohlberger. They'll look, now we have the abilities of going in there, and we have this digital footprint through cell phone services and vehicle data that can leave a footprint of everywhere you've gone. And if there's certain people missing within those geographical areas, that's something that law enforcement would look at and see if the timelines match up. True crime was because his wife had to be on the belts because she kept buying belts because he was always misplacing them. And I I can tell you this, Mrs. Steve, I've never misplaced one of Mrs. Steve's belts. Um, and if any of you out there have a significant other that is misplacing your belts, you may have to look at them a little bit closer. Um, and because that's, you know, why would you be misplacing your wife's belts? Um, and and so there's an issue just in with that. No, I don't, Junior. I don't think it was. I think it was just a couple, three of them, not a couple. Yeah, of the a couple of them at the of the Gilgo Four. Uh, True crime. Where do you think he committed the crimes? Near the dump site? No. There's a state park up at the other end that he may have, but then again, it may be totally within his residence while she's away, and or it could have been, you know, we see uh, that some of the victims, of course, they're going to meet at a certain location, and what measures did he take, and where were those locations? Was it motel rooms? Was he able to lure them away from that into some of the isolated areas, or did he just simply take them home? And that explains why we have the continued contamination from his wife and family DNA. And I think that's the simplest thing is that at some point they were at his home, because we know law enforcement spent a lot of time at his home, and they wouldn't have spent a lot of time at his home digging up everything unless there's a reason. And so I think that's one of the clues that's more than likely he spent a lot of time there. Um, do you think his brother in South Carolina, his mother in Virginia, you think he'd go that far? Yes, absolutely. Uh, you know, these offenders, you look at the Golden State, Bundy, um, you know, even while they're being sought and pursued, they still reach out and will always. I mean, these are monsters, and they feed that monster. Whatever it takes to fulfill their fantasy and that drive, they're going to do it. I mean, you're talking about a psychopath, narcissistic psychopaths, that it's all about them, and it's whatever makes them and their world seem total, and feeds that junkie addiction that they have to homicides or whatever uh, uh, is the on their menu of evil. Babs forever. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Yes, Anna, I agree. He's absolutely capable of committing them anywhere. Kelly Steele. Another creator shared an article about one of Rex's relatives in the priesthood who lived on Long Island was accused of SA on children. Could the body location have connection to Rex's childhood? Anything could be, absolutely. And it, you know, what drove him to pick that area? That would be a great question. If he had to answer one question, that'd probably be one of my first question is, why did you choose this area? and what drove you to that? It says that one of the belts found on Ring's body belonged to Asa, and that's the thing. Rather than take the belt somewhere out, that if that was something that was accessible at his residence, then I expect that he would have played whatever games he would have played at the residence and had firsthand access to that belt at the residence. And so that's just my opinion, of course. Bama Sin has been a member for 9 months. Thank you. She says, woohoo, 9 months since I found my first crime show. Good. Glad to have you here. Appreciate your support. There's a new term. Happy Webiversary. Say that 5 times quick. Webiversary. Oh. Amazon, $9. Thank you. Appreciate that. We will use that. We got Texas travel coming up. Did he travel a lot for work? I don't know, but law enforcement does. They'll be looking at not only his travels, because if he traveled away from home while his family was at home, that gives him the opportunity of being alone with victims in wherever he was traveling to. And then, of course, whenever his wife was traveling out of the country, that would have given him time to have whatever deeds he wanted to commit within the privacy of his home, that he would have had those times. Do you think he had useful contacts in local law enforcement? We see that some of these, it's sad to say, but if you look at Kohlberger, if you look at BTK, there is a certain part of the society out there of these types of offenders that like that persona of law enforcement of control. And so they have interest in law enforcement. They hang around law enforcement. They want to know the news. They want to keep track of what's going on. So, yes, I think that he probably had more friends in law enforcement than we know. True crime. What knowledge do you think his wife had regarding all of this? I don't know if she had any, but I think, there's been other wives that had no knowledge of what their husbands do until it's too late. And so rather than attack, I choose not to. But if evidence comes up, regardless on this case or any other case out there of where the family members are aware of that situation, then of course they should be held to the highest degree. Matt's been a member for 2 months. Great work, Steve. Knowledgeable, informative. Glad you're here. Appreciate your support. Miss Cyrene, good to see you. Yes, some of this, good question, Josh. Steve, does this article support the value of geographic profiling? What are your thoughts on such profiling? Yes, the geographical profiling, there's always that. Why do offenders live in certain areas and certain crime areas, and their travels of what their ideal victim is? And yes, I do believe in it. There's been, there's a lot of information out there, and with the new AI and some of the systems that will be coming online in the future, I think we'll see more of it, and I think that law enforcement will benefit from those abilities of being able to predict not only who's committing those crimes, but what, we always knew when there was a high crime rate in certain areas. We did stakeouts. And but knowing where that person lives will be extremely important. But yes, I like profiling. Olivia too, member for 9 months. I love his channel and the chatters. Glad you're here. We enjoy you also. And Anna has a good point that, and we see there's been a lot of the social media and some of these dating sites and meeting sites that have been created over the years that almost several of them have been that we had serial offenders working within those that was using them to pick out victims. Would he have done that? I think he may have looked at it and able to make contact, especially if he's using a lot of burner phones. And there's a reason he's purchasing those burner phones, and that's to contact for some reason. And it's not that you just buy a burner phone and just dial up a strange number. You buy that burner phone for a purpose. And what was that purpose? And he knew when he needed a burner phone and to be able to contact those victims and keep separation from. So, yes, I think the social media played a large part in it. Olivia, too. I wonder how far in advance he planned his attacks, or did he just attack with no forethought? No, organized offenders, I think he absolutely knew each and every time, and he looked for those opportunities. And he was like what BTK said, that he would have multiple projects at any one time, and that whatever opportunities arose, he would take care of it. His wife didn't seem surprised at arrest. It is what it is. Good point. Now, Mrs. Steve is very matter of fact also. She's extremely calm in any type of situation. She's just flat toned. She'll tell you exactly like it is. And so I don't know if his wife is of that nature or not. And you can't tell if it's just um, now, if it involves the dogs and something's coming after the dogs, she gets excited. But that's about the only time I've ever seen Mrs. Steve get upset. Um, Generally, when I hurt myself, it's just, what have you done? Why are you bleeding on my floor? Um, Molly, True Crime Web. The DA came out today and gave the DNA they have now, one in the zillions numbers on the hairs, etc. Rex's attorney didn't know that. I think that's the DA's trying to get him to plead out. Absolutely. It's all a strategy. There's a channel I watch sometimes that's about crime scene cleanup. I don't see how they do it. Yes, there's nothing, by the time those guys get there, there's nothing good about it. And of all things, to be caught by a discarded pizza crust and napkin. Well, he was on the radar for some reason prior to that, and but that's one of the things. And that's the final nail in the coffin, or as they was building the coffin for him. That's where the nails started coming in, and that's just one nail of many. That, but there's going to be other nails that led up to them picking up that pizza crust. They just didn't go out and decide one day to check a pizza crust and a napkin. They did that for a purpose. Austin's got to go get firewood. Why is there more attention being made about the wife's DNA being on the victims rather than Rex's? You have to, whatever the evidence at the scene is, whatever you have the most of, that's what you highlight the case with. That's what they'll bring into it. And they're going to link it through this manner that, of course, his wife in some of these cases, when they went missing, is in a different country. So how would the wife's DNA get on those victims? Who has access to things that would be contaminated by the wife's DNA? And of course, that answer is Rex. And so they'll have to look at it through that view. Since say we're wackadoodle, 13 months. Miranda Lee, I will be thinking of you tomorrow. Thank you. Appreciate everybody being here. Trying to get caught up with chat, guys. Doing pretty good here. Now, if losing socks is a crime, I'd be serving time right now. I don't know what happens to socks. I really don't. It's a mystery. It's one of the modern mysteries. Did all the victims pass from the same way strangulation? I don't know. Law enforcement, sometimes they may have not been able to identify cause of death or manner of death, but I don't know if they would have that in all of them or not. Appreciate everybody being here tonight, guys. Getting there. I'm getting slowly but surely. I'm not too far behind. I'm not 4 minutes behind. True Crime Web. I wonder what he did before technology allowed him to stalk victims. I guess it was old-fashioned way of looking for target. Yes, these offenders. You know, you can look at from the newspaper boys, these serial offenders that went after them. Each of these type of offenders, they know the victims of where to go out and look for these victims. We live in a society that has supermarkets, salons. We are, you know, if you're looking for a certain type of individual, you know where to go. Where do people shop? Where are the clothes stores? Now, some of the internet shopping now may take away from some of the brick and mortars, but back in the heyday, it's like any predator out there that's in nature. They go to those where animals eat, and they go to where animals drink, and humans have those same musts that we have to go out and we have to shop, and there's only certain areas, and these predators understand that, and they'll go to those areas. You know, Bundy would go to places and pick the lone female that he identified walking back to a parking area or something, and each of them, you know, they have their preferences of how they select their victims, and it's, you know, but yeah, there's it's always going on and it always will. Josh the Posh, you was unable to make super chat work tonight. Yeah, appreciate your efforts. Ah, thank you, Bama. Gifted 5 True Crime Web memberships. Thank you for your support. I don't know if you got another 5 or not. but it may have cycled you twice. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Slowly but surely, we're making headway, guys. Yes, there's geolocation and other forms of discovering cell phone numbers in areas of crimes. Throwaway phones are harder to hide now. Absolutely. But, you know, we're about to find out with the Koberger case, some of the new tracking information, if the father is correct, that we're going to be made aware of certain other things. And Anna is correct. Bundy went on to a crowded beach. Was that part of his risk and reward? That the higher the risk, the bigger reward emotionally or whatever, feeding and fulfilling that fantasy. That was something that he would do. Nanar, true crime. Not long ago, a man was telling me he had to go find a date online now. I had to remind him that the old ways still work. I was hit more in stores than I could be. Yes, I know nothing about that. Came along after Mrs. Steve and I have been together, going on probably 35 years. Been about to have a 34th anniversary. And Sharon Edwards says, I think it was said these ladies advertise on Craigslist. Very possible. Like I said, he bought burner phones for a reason. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate everybody being here. I got called up. We thank all the supporters tonight that contributed through donations, memberships. Appreciate everybody watching. If you liked it, subscribe, share it with some of your friends. We recently just broke 12,000 subs, and so the channel's growing, footprint's growing. We absolutely appreciate it. Got some travels that's coming up. We got to get out to possibly have to go to Texas and in the next few weeks, but I'll let y'all know as soon as those plans are decided, and if Larry will need us out there or not during this documentary that's coming on with Amber. But anyway, guys, y'all stay safe out there. Appreciate y'all being with me tonight. If you have any questions you want to send to me, absolutely do so. Thank you, guys. Stay safe.